Every Friday, for 25 years, my husband locked that door. He swore it was government work. I believed every word. Until one day, my 7-year-old son said something that changed everything. Hello, everyone. My name is Meriwether Blackwood. Today, I'm 86 years old. Before I begin my story, I'd like to ask you watching to give this video a like, subscribe to the Grandma's Diary channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It helps me continue sharing the lessons I've learned in this long life. The story I'm about to tell still hurts, even after so many years, but perhaps it can help someone going through something similar. It was 1957. I had just turned 18. I was born and raised in Millfield, a small town where everyone knew each other. My parents owned the only general store on the town square. I worked there since I was a little girl, learning to handle numbers and people. I didn't have much education. Back then, a girl from a good family finished elementary school and was ready for marriage, and that's what happened to me. Theodore Blackwood came to our town to work at the local bank. He was 27, from the city, always elegant with his impeccable suits and shiny shoes. He quickly became the talk of the town among eligible young women, tall, with piercing green eyes and a smile that, I now realize, hid more than it revealed. He began frequenting our store, first once a week, then almost daily. He always bought the same things: a pack of cigarettes, a bar of dark chocolate, and a newspaper from the city. He always had a kind word, a discreet compliment. Dad loved talking politics and business with him. "That young man will go far," my father would say. "He has a head for numbers and knows how to treat people." After 3 months, Theodore asked my father's permission to take me to the movies. It was my first real date. We saw The Princess and the Pauper with Audrey Hepburn. He held my hand throughout the film. I thought I might faint from excitement. Our courtship was brief, just 6 months. Theodore was a decisive man. At Christmas, 1956, he asked for my hand in marriage during dinner, in front of the whole family. My mother cried with joy. My father opened a bottle of wine he'd been saving for special occasions. We married in May 1957 in a simple ceremony at the main church. The reception was in the parish hall, decorated with wildflowers my aunts had picked that morning. I wore a white dress my mother and grandmother had spent months sewing. I remember every detail of that day as if it were yesterday. The scent of the flowers, the taste of the wedding cake, the music playing on the record player, and especially the feeling that my whole life was just beginning. Shortly after the wedding, we moved to an old house in the upper part of town. It was larger than we needed, but Theodore insisted. "We'll fill this house with children, Meriwether," he would say. It was a beautiful house, 2 stories with a front garden and a spacious backyard, and it had a basement. Oh, that basement! If only I had known then what I know now. In the first weeks we arranged the house together. Theodore seemed happy and attentive. We painted walls, bought some furniture, planted flowers in the garden. That's when I noticed something strange. He wouldn't let me enter the basement. "I'm going to turn that space into my private office," he said. "I work with confidential bank numbers. I need a reserved place." I didn't question it. After all, I was raised hearing that a good wife trusts her husband and respects his space. For a week, while I arranged the rest of the house, he worked alone in the basement. I heard hammering, sawing, furniture being moved. When he finished, he always locked the door. A month after our wedding, the routine that would last 25 years began. Every Friday, promptly at 7 p.m., Theodore would eat dinner quickly, take a shower, put on his best cologne, and say, "Meriwether, I need to work on confidential documents for the government. It's only 3 hours, but I cannot be interrupted under any circumstances. Please stay in the bedroom. Never try to enter the basement." At first, I thought it was strange. Why would the government send confidential documents to a bank manager in a small town? Why always on Fridays? Why exactly 3 hours? But Theodore was convincing, talking about responsibility, trust, national security. And I was too young, too naive to doubt the man I had chosen to spend the rest of my life with. Our first child, Ernest, was born in 1958, just over a year after the wedding. It was such a joy. Theodore seemed like the happiest man in the world when he held our son for the first time. He bought presents, hired a girl to help me in the first months, but Fridays remained sacred. Not even the baby's crying could interrupt his confidential work. Cecilia came in 1962, a beautiful girl with chestnut curls like mine and green eyes like her father's. This time, Theodore seemed less enthusiastic. Not that he was a bad father. He was always attentive, present. But there was something different, as if his mind was elsewhere, even when he was physically with us. It was around this time that he started traveling more for work. At first, they were short trips, 1 day, 2 at most, always to the city or to the neighboring town of Meadowbrook, which was larger than ours. Bank meetings, he explained. He would return with gifts for the children, some souvenir for me. Everything seemed normal. Our third and last child, Benjamin, was born in 1975. I was 36 by then. We weren't planning to have more children. It was a surprise for everyone, especially Theodore. I remember his face when I told him about the pregnancy. It wasn't exactly happiness, but concern. Another mouth to feed, more expenses, he muttered. I found the reaction strange. We were financially comfortable. Theodore had been promoted to general manager of the bank years before. Our other children were already grown. One more child wouldn't change our lives that much, but I accepted the explanation. After all, he was the provider, the one who worried about the bills, about the future. And after Benjamin was born, Theodore ended up becoming enchanted with the boy, as had happened with the others. Our life followed its normal course, a family like so many others at that time. I took care of the house and children. Theodore worked at the bank, was respected in town. We attended church on Sundays, had friends over for dinner once a month. And every Friday, promptly at 7 p.m., he locked himself in the basement for exactly 3 hours. Over time, it became so natural that I didn't even think about it anymore. It was just a strange family tradition that we accepted without questioning. The children grew up knowing not to disturb their father on Friday nights. When they asked why, I repeated what Theodore always said. Dad does important work for the government. It's confidential. So we reached 1982, 25 years of marriage. I was 43, Theodore 52. Ernest had already graduated in engineering and worked in the city. Cecilia was in college studying education. Only Benjamin at 7 was still a child. Our life seemed perfect to everyone. We had a beautiful house, well-educated children, respect in the community. Theodore was seen as an exemplary husband and father. I even won an award from the Mothers Club as a model family that year. If someone had asked if I was happy, I would have said yes without hesitation. Everything a woman of my generation could hope for in life, I had achieved. A good marriage, healthy children, material comfort, social respect. I never imagined it was all built on a lie. A lie that began to crumble on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when Benjamin came running from the backyard with a story about a woman and 2 children at the corner of our house. A story I didn't pay attention to at the time. How could I imagine that those unknown children carried the same blood that ran through my children's veins? How could I know that the basement held not just confidential papers, but the secret of a double life that had lasted almost as long as my marriage? The truth began to reveal itself slowly, like pieces of a puzzle fitting together. And it all started with those innocent words from my youngest son, which would forever change the course of my life. It was a Tuesday in May 1982. I remember because I had just hung new sheets on the clothesline, those I'd bought on sale at the department store. The sun was strong, typical of those days that announce the still distant summer. Benjamin was playing in the yard with his wooden cars, the ones Theodore carved on those rare Sunday mornings when he didn't go fishing with his friends from the bank. I saw my son suddenly drop his toys and run to the gate. Our house was on a corner, and from there we could see 2 streets. Benjamin had the terrible habit of talking to anyone who passed by, something that worried me. How many times had I warned him about the dangers of talking to strangers, but like any 7-year-old, he forgot my advice minutes after receiving it. I left the sheets to dry and went after him. But when I reached the gate, I only saw my son waving to someone already turning the corner, a woman in a light blue dress and 2 children. That's all I could see from a distance. "Who was that, son?" I asked, fixing his hair that the wind had disheveled. "A pretty lady with 2 children, Mom," he answered with that childlike simplicity. The girl said I must be their brother. She said, "Look, Mom, could that be him? Dad said we have a brother." "Isn't that funny, Mom? I already have Ernest and Cecilia. I don't need more siblings." I felt a strange shiver, one of those that run up your spine when something isn't right. But I quickly dismissed the thought. It must just be a misunderstanding. Some family looking for relatives, perhaps. Our town wasn't that small. "Don't talk to strangers, Benjamin." That's all I said, and we went back inside. That night, while serving dinner, I thought about mentioning the incident to Theodore, but he arrived so tired, so absorbed in his thoughts, that I thought it better to wait for another time. And like so many small things over the years, the episode was forgotten, or at least dormant, in some corner of my mind. 3 weeks later, on a Wednesday, Benjamin came home from school more excited than usual. His little eyes were shining in that way that only happens when he discovers something new and fascinating. "Mom! Mom! We have a new teacher at school!" he exclaimed as he dropped his backpack on the kitchen floor, ignoring the proper place I had shown him so many times. "That's nice, son. And what is she like?" I asked, distracted, while preparing lunch. "She's pretty, has long hair like yours, only lighter. And guess what, Mom? She has a picture of Dad in her wallet. I saw when she opened it to give me a gold star for my drawing." I stopped stirring the sauce I was preparing. I felt the blood freeze in my veins. "A picture of your father? Are you sure, Benjamin?" "Yes, I am. It was Dad hugging her and 2 children." I asked why she had a picture of my dad, and she turned all red and closed her wallet quickly. She said I must be confused, but it was Dad, Mom, I'm sure. "And what's this teacher's name?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Miss Claire. She's going to substitute for Mrs. Margaret, who's sick." Claire. The name meant nothing to me at that moment. Theodore had never mentioned anyone by that name. I tried to calm myself. It must just be a child's confusion. How many men in town didn't look like my husband? Theodore had nothing extraordinary in his appearance. Dark hair, already with some gray at the temples, medium height, common build. "Must be someone who looks like your father, son. Now go wash your hands for lunch." Benjamin ran off, the subject already forgotten in his childish mind. But for me, something had changed. A small seed of doubt had been planted in my heart, so small it was barely noticeable. But there it was. That same night, while Theodore was taking a shower, I did something I had never done in 25 years of marriage. I searched through his suit pockets. I don't know what I expected to find. Perhaps nothing, just to calm my restless mind, but I found a small envelope with delicate handwriting that certainly wasn't from any bank employee. I didn't have the courage to open it. I returned it to the pocket, my hands trembling slightly. I was behaving like a jealous and suspicious wife. Theodore had never given me real reasons to doubt him. Sure, there was that strange Friday commitment, but even that seemed harmless after so many years. Many husbands had much worse behaviors. They drank, gambled, some even hit their wives. Theodore had always been respectful, affectionate in his restrained way. In the days that followed, I observed my husband more carefully. I noticed small details that had gone unnoticed before, how he always checked the phone as soon as he arrived, even when it hadn't rung, how sometimes he went out to buy cigarettes and took longer than necessary, how certain phone calls made him lower his voice to almost a whisper. And I started paying more attention to our family budget. Theodore had always controlled the household finances, natural since he was a banker. I received a generous allowance for household expenses, but I never questioned where the rest of his salary went. I trusted he was saving for our old age, for Benjamin's future college, which was still to come. But in those weeks of growing doubt, I started doing the math. Our standard of living, though comfortable, didn't seem to match a bank manager's salary. We lived well, but not luxuriously. The car was 5 years old, The living room furniture needed to be replaced. The curtains were faded. Where was the money going? One afternoon, while Benjamin was at a friend's house, I went to his school. I told the secretary I needed to speak with the new teacher, this Claire. The secretary informed me she would only come the next day. Today she was teaching in Meadowbrook, the neighboring town. Meadowbrook was only 20 miles away. It was larger than Millfield, with almost twice the population. Theodore went there frequently for work, for meetings at the central bank branch. I returned home restless. That night during dinner, I tried to casually probe my husband. "Theodore, do you know a teacher named Claire? Apparently she's substituting for Benjamin's teacher." I saw his face lose color. It was so quick that if I hadn't been watching carefully, I would have missed it. "Claire? No, I don't know any Claire. Why?" "Nothing important. Benjamin mentioned she's a very good teacher." The subject died there, but his reaction lit another warning signal in my heart. The next morning, I did something unthinkable. After Theodore left for work and Benjamin for school, I caught the bus to Meadowbrook. I had no clear plan. Perhaps just to confirm I was becoming paranoid, that it was all coincidences and an overactive imagination. I got off downtown, near the main square. I had never walked alone in that town. I always came accompanied by Theodore or the children, usually for special shopping or medical consultations that our small Millfield didn't offer. I walked aimlessly for a few blocks, feeling foolish. What did I expect to find? I was about to catch the bus back when I saw a woman across the street who seemed familiar. Light brown hair, simple but elegant blue dress. She was entering a yellow 2-story house with a small garden in front. Driven by an impulse I couldn't control, I crossed the street and approached the house. There was a discreet sign at the entrance. "Private Lessons, Miss Claire Wells." Below, in smaller letters, "Academic Support for Elementary School." My heart raced. Here was a name and a face for my growing suspicions, but it could still be a coincidence. How many teachers named Claire must there be in the country? I stood there, undecided, until the door opened again and the woman came out. She seemed to have forgotten something in the car parked in front. That's when I noticed the vehicle, a dark blue Chevette, last year's model. I remembered Theodore mentioning that the bank had acquired some new cars for regional managers. Could it be possible? Before I could complete the thought, the woman saw me. Our eyes met for a moment. I saw the surprise in hers, followed by something else, fear, guilt, before she quickly looked away and went back inside the house. I returned to Millfield with more questions than answers. In the days that followed, I continued observing, collecting small clues. A phone bill with several calls to Meadowbrook, money missing from the emergency savings we maintained, the different perfume I sometimes smelled on Theodore's shirts, even after washing. And then, on a Thursday morning, while tidying his office upstairs, not the basement one, which remained inaccessible, I found a school book hidden among his accounting folders. It was a children's literature book with a dedication on the first page. "To Helena, on your 9th birthday. With love, Dad." Helena? Who was Helena? We didn't know any child by that name among our friends or relatives. The dedication date was recent, just 2 months ago. I confronted Theodore that night. I showed him the book and asked who Helena was. "She's a client's daughter," he answered too quickly. "I promised a birthday present." He took the book from my hands and put it away, visibly uncomfortable. It was the last straw. After weeks of accumulating suspicions, that poorly told lie broke something inside me. 25 years of trust crumbled like a sandcastle before the tide. The following Friday, I observed the usual routine. Theodore arrived from work at 6 p.m., ate dinner quickly, took a shower. At 6:50 p.m., he said he needed to go out to buy cigarettes before his confidential work. As soon as he left, I went to the bedroom and found his suit folded over the chair. In the inside pockets, I found a key different from the one he used for the basement. It was smaller, golden, with a small clover-shaped keychain. That key was the final evidence I needed. If he was really just going to work in the basement, why would he need another key? The answer was clear. He wasn't staying in the basement during those 3 hours. He was leaving the house through another entrance, probably the back door that led to an alley, and was going to meet her, Claire, and perhaps also the children, Helena, and who else? When Theodore returned, 20 minutes later, I was already in our bedroom, pretending to read a book. I heard him lock the basement door, as he always did, the familiar ritual that now seemed like a mockery. I slowly counted to 100, giving him time to think everything was normal. Then I quietly went down the stairs and stopped in front of the basement door, 25 years respecting that invisible boundary, 25 years of blind trust. I put my ear against the wood. Silence. Not the sound of papers being handled, not the noise of a chair moving. Nothing. I knew what I had to do. I wouldn't use the key I found. I didn't know which door it belonged to, and it didn't matter anymore. The truth was there. Behind that door, I was never allowed to cross. And after a quarter century, I deserved to know it. I went to the garage, got the hammer Theodore used for small repairs. I returned to the basement door, took a deep breath, raised the hammer, and discharged all my strength, all my contained anger, all my growing disillusionment against the lock. The crash seemed to shake the entire house, or perhaps it was just my world collapsing. The lock gave way on the second blow. With my heart pounding, I pushed the door and turned on the light. What I saw before me wasn't an office full of confidential government documents, nor a love hideaway with sofas and pillows. It was indeed an office, yes, but dedicated to a life that wasn't ours. The basement air had a strange smell. It wasn't mold or dampness, as you would expect from a rarely visited place. It was a mixture of new paper, feminine perfume, and that aftershave lotion Theodore only used on special occasions. Never with me. The yellowish light revealed a meticulously organized room. A mahogany desk occupied the center, one of those expensive ones I would never dare buy for our house, considering them too extravagant. Shelves covered an entire wall, full of carefully labeled folders. A brown leather armchair was positioned near a reading lamp. It looked like it came from a catalog, not the improvised office I had imagined for all these years. But it wasn't the unexpected elegance of the place that made my stomach sink. It was what I saw on the wall opposite the door, a map of Meadowbrook with colored pins marking specific locations. Below the map, a framed photograph that confirmed my worst fears. Theodore, embracing a woman and 2 children, all smiling in front of a birthday cake. The woman was her, the same one I saw that day in Meadowbrook, Claire. With trembling hands, I picked up the frame, turned it over, and read the inscription on the back. To Teddy, my love, our family is your greatest motivation. Claire, August, and Helena. Christmas, 1977. Our family. Christmas, 1977. While I was preparing the dinner for our children, decorating our tree, wrapping presents, he was posing for photos with his other family. I put the frame back on the table, feeling a dizziness that forced me to sit in the leather armchair. Suddenly, the air seemed too heavy to breathe. 25 years of marriage reduced to an elaborate lie. 25 years of trust turned to dust before my eyes. I don't know how long I sat there, paralyzed by shock. Minutes, hours, time, lost meaning. When I finally managed to move again, I went to the desk. The drawers weren't locked. Why would they be? Theodore never imagined I would dare break his only rule in all these years. The first drawer contained financial documents, bank statements, receipts, invoices, all carefully organized by date. The second kept correspondence, and it was there that I found the definitive proof of a parallel life that had lasted almost as long as our marriage. Dozens of letters chronologically organized in folders. The oldest dated April 1960, just 3 years after our wedding. The delicate handwriting was unmistakably feminine. The thin paper still held a faint perfume. With my heart in pieces, I began to read. My dearest Teddy, it's been 3 months since our reunion at that bankers' conference, and I still can't believe fate brought us together after so many years. I know your situation is complicated, that you have commitments, a wife, but what we feel for each other is stronger than any obstacle. I'm not asking you to abandon your current life, just not to abandon me again. Occasional meetings, letters like this, are enough for me for now. Forever yours, Claire. The letter trembled in my hands. Bankers' Conference. In 1960, Theodore traveled to a manager's meeting in the city. He returned with a brooch for me, a toy car for Ernest, who was still a baby. He told stories about the lectures, formal dinners, new professional contacts he made, and apparently reconnected with a past love. I continued reading letter after letter, each word cutting deeper than the previous one. The story of a romance that never really ended, just was interrupted when Theodore moved to our town. Claire was his girlfriend from college days. They had marriage plans that never materialized because of a fight he never mentioned, a girlfriend he never cited. The letters from 1962 and 1963 spoke of furtive meetings, forbidden passion, vague promises of a future together when the time was right. Until 1967, when the tone changed. Teddy, I don't know how to say this any other way. I'm expecting your child. I know it's not what we planned, but it happened. I'm not asking you to abandon your family for us. I know your children with Merriweather need their father. I just want my baby to have your last name, to know his father, even if just in occasional visits. In December that year, August was born. The following letters contained photos of the baby, accounts of his first steps, first words. Theodore not only gave money to support them, he was present in his son's life. A son who was growing just 20 miles away, while our own children rarely saw their father on weekends due to his business trips. In 1970, Helena was born. Another unplanned pregnancy, according to the letters, but clearly desired by Theodore. I saw photos of her as a baby, clippings of locks of hair kept as relics, meticulously chosen Christmas presents, celebrated birthdays, family moments captured in photographs where he smiled with an abandon he rarely showed in our house. Meanwhile, in the letters, Claire pressed increasingly for a resolution. When are you going to tell her the truth? The children need a full-time father. August asks, why do you only appear on Fridays? So that was it. The famous confidential Friday meetings never existed. For 25 years, my husband would leave through the back of our house, get into his car parked in the alley, and drive to Meadowbrook to his other family. And every Christmas, every birthday, every special moment we shared, he maintained a parallel life just a few miles away. The image of Theodore blowing out candles on 2 different birthday cakes, one with me, another with Claire, caused such strong nausea that I thought I might faint. But the worst was yet to come. In a separate folder, I found more recent letters, no longer romantic but practical, correspondence with a lawyer, consultations on division of assets, divorce procedures, and a draft letter to me, dated 2 weeks earlier, that Theodore never sent. Merriweather. After much reflection, I need to confess a truth I've been hiding for many years. Our marriage, despite having produced wonderful children, was never what I truly desired for my life. I've met another woman, another family, who represent my true happiness. I didn't want to hurt you, which is why I postponed this confession for so long. But now, with Ernest and Cecilia already adults and Benjamin growing up, I believe the time has come to follow my heart. I hope that someday you can understand and forgive. I couldn't finish reading. The hypocrisy was nauseating, postponing the confession so as not to hurt me, as if prolonging a lie for 25 years was an act of consideration. I continued searching through the drawers. I found accounting books different from those Theodore brought home. In them, records of money diverted from the bank to support the Meadowbrook house. Small amounts at first that increased over the years. Clients' money temporarily applied for his benefit before being returned. A sophisticated scheme that would never be discovered as long as he occupied the position of manager. What shocked me most was a folder containing information about each of us, me and my 3 children, like an anthropological study of an exotic family, notes on our routines, preferences, habits. Meriwether goes to the market on Wednesdays, always between 9 and 11 a.m. Best time for phone calls. Ernest hates fishing. Don't invite him on trips with that excuse. Cecilia suspects something. Monitor comments. We were pieces in a game he meticulously controlled. Puppets whose strings he pulled from his secret office. And I, the foolish wife, the unwitting guardian of his theater of lies. Amid the searing pain of betrayal, I felt something grow inside me. It wasn't just anger or sadness, it was an icy determination, a desire to regain control. For 25 years, I had lived a life decided by him. Now, finally, it was time to take the leading role in my own story. I methodically organized the letters, financial documents, photographs, placing them in an empty folder I found on the shelf. Evidence that could destroy the impeccable reputation Theodore had built over the years. Proof of fraud, adultery, years of calculated lies. As I gathered these fragments of a secret life, I heard the living room clock strike 10 p.m. Theodore would return soon, thinking his double life was still safe, his secret still untouched. He would return to find an obedient wife who respected his private space for another Friday. I sat in the leather armchair, the folder of evidence in my lap, and waited. The initial anger had transformed into an icy calm. I thought of everything I had sacrificed, studies, dreams, a career of my own. I had dedicated my existence to being a good wife, a good mother, while he built a parallel life with another woman, other children. At 10:25 p.m., I heard the back door open and close softly. Familiar footsteps in the hallway, key in the broken lock. The basement door opened. Theodore's face when he saw me sitting there, illuminated only by the table lamp, was an image I'll never forget. Surprise, confusion, then recognition of the situation. And finally, something I had never seen in his eyes. Fear. Meriwether, what are you doing here? His voice tried to maintain authority but trembled slightly. I didn't answer immediately. I let his gaze scan the environment, noticing the open drawers, the folder in my lap, the turned frame on the table. 25 years, Theodore. 25 years believing in confidential meetings, in government work, in business trips. My voice came out calmer than I expected. 25 years while you built another family 20 miles from here. He closed the door behind him. He didn't deny, didn't try to make excuses. Perhaps he knew it was useless in the face of evidence scattered throughout the office. You shouldn't have found out this way. The same words from the draft letter, now spoken aloud, as if there were an appropriate way to discover a betrayal of 2.5 decades. And how should I have found out, Theodore? Through a cold letter, or waiting until our youngest child grew up so you could decide it was the right time to abandon your facade family? I saw his face pale at the mention of Benjamin. I always thought he had a special affection for our youngest. Now I understood the strange look when he learned of the unplanned pregnancy. He already had 2 children with Claire. He didn't want more responsibilities. It's not like that, Meriwether. I never planned for things to get to this point. Claire was a girlfriend from my youth. We reconnected by chance. One mistake led to another. Then came the children. Spare me the justifications, I cut him off, raising my hand. I read all the letters. I know exactly how it happened, how it progressed, how you planned each step. I even know you used bank money to support your double life. At the mention of money, I saw panic in his eyes. His reputation he could rebuild, but misappropriation of funds, that would mean the end of his career, possibly even prison. Meriwether, we can talk about this in a civilized manner. I made mistakes, I admit, but think about the children, Benjamin especially. A scandal wouldn't benefit anyone. Typical of Theodore, trying to manipulate the situation until the last moment, using our children as a shield for his own moral failings. Don't worry about our children now, I replied. Worry about what you'll tell the bank board when they receive copies of these financial records. It was my first bluff in life. I never considered myself a vindictive person. But at that moment, seeing the panic grow on his face, I felt a bitter satisfaction. For once, I was the one in control. He was the one fearing the consequences of his actions. "What do you want, Merriweather?" His voice was now almost a whisper. "Tell me what I need to do for this to stay just between us." I rose slowly, holding the folder against my chest like a shield. "I want you to leave my house now, tonight. Take only what's necessary. Tomorrow we'll talk about the terms of the divorce." Divorce? He seemed genuinely shocked, as if after everything, he still expected me to accept the situation somehow. But what about our family? The audacity of that question hit me like a slap. Our family? After maintaining a second family for decades? Our family ended the moment you decided to start another one, Theodore. Now you have until midnight to leave. Or else, tomorrow morning, the entire bank board will receive copies of these documents. He stared at me for a long moment, as if trying to assess my determination. He must have seen something in my eyes that he had never noticed before. Resolution. Wounded dignity. The strength of a woman who, at 43, discovered she had always had her own voice. Without saying anything more, he passed by me and went up the stairs. I heard him opening and closing drawers in the bedroom, the sound of suitcases being dragged. 30 minutes later, he was at the front door with 2 suitcases and a defeated expression. "Where will I go?" he asked, suddenly seeming older, more fragile. "To your real family," I replied, holding the door. "Isn't that what you always wanted?" When the door closed behind him, I finally let the tears come. Not tears of sadness for the loss of the husband. That grief would come later, along with anger and all the other emotions that time would bring. At that moment, I was crying with relief, the relief of finally knowing the truth, however painful it might be. I quietly went up the stairs, checking on Benjamin, who was sleeping soundly, oblivious to the storm that had just swept through our family. Tomorrow I would have to explain his father's absence. Tomorrow I would have to begin rebuilding our lives. But that night, lying alone in the bed I had shared with a stranger for 25 years, I made myself a promise. From that moment on, my life would be guided only by truth. No illusions, no voluntary blindness. However difficult the path ahead might be, at least it would be a path I myself had chosen to tread. Dawn brought a strange quietness to our house. Theodore's absence was palpable, as if even the air knew something fundamental had changed. I prepared breakfast for Benjamin, as I always did, trying to maintain an appearance of normality that no longer existed. "Where's Dad?" was my son's first question when he sat at the table, rubbing his sleepy little eyes. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that his father had another family? That those children he saw on the corner weeks ago were indeed his half-siblings? That the substitute teacher was his father's other woman? "Dad had to travel for work," I answered, hating myself for the lie, but knowing the complete truth was too heavy for those small shoulders. "A long trip. We'll talk more about it later, when your siblings arrive." The lie left a bitter taste in my mouth. After discovering 25 years of falsehoods, there I was, starting my new chapter with another untruth, but it would be the last one, I promised myself. A white lie to buy time. That's all. I called Ernest and Cecilia right after leaving Benjamin at school. My voice must have betrayed something, because both promised to come home immediately. Ernest would catch a bus from the city and arrive in the late afternoon. Cecilia would abandon her college classes to be home by lunchtime. While I waited, I began organizing my thoughts and plans. The house was in my name, a wedding gift from my parents, something Theodore had always silently resented. The family savings were in a joint account, but I had access. I needed to act quickly before he emptied everything. At 10 a.m., I went to the bank, not our bank, where Theodore was the manager, but a competing branch on the other side of town, where nobody knew me as Mrs. Blackwood. I opened an account in my name and transferred half of the savings from the joint account. Not a penny more, not one less. Fair, I thought, considering that he supported another family with what remained of his salary, or worse, with money diverted from clients. When I left the branch, I saw Irene Cordell, wife of one of the directors of the bank where Theodore worked. She quickly looked away, pretending not to see me. Strange, I thought. Irene was always effusive, one of those people who wave from across the street. It was my first clue that the news was already spreading. Upon returning home, I found Cecilia sitting on the entrance steps, her face marked with tears. My heart sank. Somehow she already knew. "Dad," she began as soon as I came through the gate. "He has another family. Is it true, Mom?" We sat on the porch in those wicker chairs where we used to have lemonade on sunny Sundays. The same porch where Theodore had proposed to me, where we took photos with each newborn child, where we celebrated our silver anniversary just a few months before. A celebration that now seemed like a grotesque farce. I told Cecilia everything, not the sordid details, but the essentials. Her father had maintained a relationship with another woman for more than 20 years. They had 2 children together. He was planning to leave us soon. "How did you find out?" she asked between sobs. I explained about the suspicions, Benjamin's comments, the silent investigation that culminated in breaking into the basement. At the mention of the basement, I saw a flash of understanding in her eyes. "Fridays," she murmured. I always wondered about those Fridays. Cecilia confessed that at 13, she had tried to spy on Theodore's famous confidential work. She hid in the garden one night just to see him leave through the back and depart in the car. When she confronted him the next day, he invented a story about needing to fetch special documents in another town. He threatened to punish her severely if she mentioned it to me. Frightened, she kept the secret. "Forgive me, Mom," she cried. "I should have told you." I hugged my daughter tightly. It wasn't her fault. We were all victims of the same web of lies. Ernest arrived in the late afternoon, his expression somber, his eyes red. Unlike Cecilia, his reaction wasn't sadness, but contained fury. "Where is he now?" he asked as soon as he came through the door. "I don't know for certain. I imagine in Meadowbrook with them." "I'm going after him," he declared, fists clenched. "No," I cut him off firmly. "That's not how we're going to resolve this. We're better than him, Ernest. We'll act with dignity." That night, the 3 of us, me, Ernest, and Cecilia, talked at length about how to tell the truth to Benjamin and how to rebuild our lives. We decided that I would explain to the youngest in simplified terms that his father had gone to live in another house with other people who also needed him. With time, when he was older, he would know the whole truth. While we discussed these painful plans, the phone rang incessantly. We didn't answer. We could already imagine. The news was circulating around town. Millfield had only 15,000 inhabitants at that time. Secrets didn't last long. The next morning, I confirmed this suspicion when taking Benjamin to school. The looks, the whispers, the conversations that abruptly ceased when I approached. Somehow, everyone already knew. Perhaps some bank employee had seen Theodore leaving with the suitcases. Perhaps someone in Meadowbrook had noticed his sudden move to Claire's house. Or perhaps, this occurred to me with a chill down my spine, he himself was spreading his version of the story, trying to control the narrative before I could do it. Confirmation came in the form of Dora Mitchell, my neighbor and longtime friend. She knocked on my door early in the afternoon, her eyes full of compassion and embarrassment. "Merriweather, are you okay? I've heard such strange things." I invited her in, offered coffee. With Benjamin at school and my older children out resolving practical matters, it was the first time I would talk about the subject with someone outside the family. "What are they saying, Dora?" I asked directly. She hesitated, stirring her coffee unnecessarily. "They're saying that Theodore, that he resigned from the bank yesterday, that he's moving to Meadowbrook. Some are saying," she lowered her voice, even though there was no one else in the room, "that he has another woman there, and children." So that was it. Not only had I lost my husband, our family had lost its privacy. Now we were the scandal of the moment, the subject in beauty salons, at bakery counters, at church exits. "It's true, Dora," I confirmed, feeling a strange relief in finally speaking openly. "I discovered the day before yesterday that Theodore has maintained a double life for more than 20 years. Her eyes widened. One thing was to hear rumors, quite another to have confirmation. My God, Merriweather, and what are you going to do now? That was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? What does a 43-year-old woman do who has dedicated her entire adult life to a marriage that turned out to be a farce? What skills did I have beyond being a wife and mother? I'm going to live, Dora, I replied, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. I'm going to raise my youngest son, support the older ones, and find a means of sustenance. I will not be defined by Theodore's betrayal. Brave words, but ones that hid an ocean of insecurities. The truth is, I was terrified. In 1982, a divorced woman still carried a stigma, especially in small towns like ours. I would be the abandoned one, the poor thing, or worse, for some malicious people, the one who couldn't hold on to her husband. How would I face the pitying looks? How would I support Benjamin, who still needed so many years of care and education? In the days that followed, these questions tormented me, but I also discovered an inner strength I didn't know I possessed. The first battle came in the form of a lawyer hired by Theodore, a thin man with small glasses and a sour expression who appeared at my door a week after the separation. He brought a proposal for an agreement. Theodore would give up his part of the house, which, as I already mentioned, wasn't his by right, in exchange for my silence about the financial irregularities at the bank. Mr. Blackwood is willing to pay a reasonable alimony for the minor, said the lawyer, avoiding looking directly at me, as long as the lady agrees to keep certain irregularities confidential. Blackmail, I thought. After everything, he was still trying to manipulate me. Tell Mr. Blackwood, I replied, emphasizing the formal title, that I don't negotiate with blackmailers. The alimony is my son's right, not a bargaining chip for my silence. If he wants me to keep quiet about his frauds, he should do the right thing and assume his responsibilities as a father. The lawyer left, visibly uncomfortable. 2 hours later, I received a phone call from Theodore, the first contact since he had left the house. "Have you gone crazy?" he vociferated over the phone. "Do you know what happens if this information leaks? I could go to prison." "You should have thought about that before diverting money from the bank, don't you think?" I retorted, surprised by my own coldness. "I won't report you, Theodore, not for you, but for my children. I don't want them to carry the stigma of having a father in prison, but I won't protect you in exchange for crumbs. I want a fair alimony, proportional to your salary. Your real salary, not the one you officially declare." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "And Claire?" he finally asked, his voice more contained. "Her children? What will become of them if I lose my job?" The audacity of that question left me momentarily speechless. Did he really expect me to care about the welfare of his second family? "They are your problem, not mine," I responded. "You created this situation, Theodore. Now deal with the consequences." I hung up, feeling a contradictory mixture of emotions: guilt for being so harsh, pride for finally standing up for myself, fear of the future, relief for setting clear boundaries. It was as if, at 43, I was learning to use a voice that had always been dormant within me. In the months that followed, that voice grew stronger. The divorce was finalized in record time. Theodore didn't want to prolong the process and risk more sordid details coming to light. I received custody of Benjamin, with supervised paternal visitation rights. The alimony was generous but insufficient to maintain the standard of living we had before. I needed to work. But doing what? My formal education had stopped at high school. My practical skills were limited to managing a house and raising children, nothing the market valued monetarily. It was Cecilia who suggested the solution. "Mom, remember those sweets you used to make for church festivals? Everyone always complimented them. You could sell them." The idea seemed too simplistic at first, but the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. I really did have a talent for confectionery, something inherited from my Italian grandmother. My fudge, coconut delights, and puddings were always the first to run out at church bazaars. And in the kitchen, I felt truly happy, in control, creative. I started small, providing sweets for children's birthday parties. Soon, some mothers from Benjamin's school became regular customers. Word of mouth did the rest. In 6 months, Merriweather's Sweets was a well-known brand in Millfield. In a year, I needed to hire help to keep up with the orders. I wouldn't say it was easy. There were nights when I cried myself to sleep, exhausted from working 16 hours straight. There were times when loneliness weighed like a stone on my chest. There were occasions when I saw Theodore with Claire in town and felt a mixture of anger, pain, and a strange relief at no longer being part of that lie. But there were also unexpected joys. The satisfaction of receiving my first payment earned exclusively through my work. The pride of seeing Benjamin growing strong and balanced, despite his father's absence. The freedom to make my own decisions, big or small, without needing to consult anyone. And perhaps most surprising, I discovered that the town didn't reject me as I had feared. On the contrary, after the initial scandal dissipated, I received more support than I could have imagined possible. Customers who insisted on buying my sweets to help poor Merriweather. Other women who, inspired by my example, found the courage to leave abusive or unhappy relationships. Even some bank directors who knew the truth about Theodore's diversions became my loyal customers as a silent way of acknowledging the error they committed by protecting him for so long. 2 years after the separation, I received an offer to supply sweets to the most elegant catering service in Millfield. It was my first major commercial contract. I remember sitting in the kitchen of my house, that same house where I had lived for so many years as Theodore's wife, and realizing I no longer defined myself that way. I was Merriweather Blackwood, confectioner, entrepreneur, single mother, a woman who at 45 had finally begun to live on her own terms. The basement, that place that for so long represented secrets and lies, was transformed into the headquarters of my small business. Where before there were maps of the neighboring town and records of a double life, now were shelves with imported ingredients, molds of all sizes, recipe books I began to collect. It was a form of exorcism. Each sweet that left that formerly forbidden space seemed to take with it a bit of the pain, transforming it into something sweet, nourishing, honest. And Theodore, well, life has its ironies. 6 months after our separation, he lost his job at the bank. Not because of my denunciation, I kept my word, but because Claire discovered he was maintaining a third relationship with an employee of the bank itself. The scandal was inevitable, and the directors, who had tolerated his financial diversions, could not ignore the breach of ethical conduct within the institution itself. That's when I realized a fundamental truth. People who live by lies rarely change. The betrayal wasn't an isolated mistake, but part of the essence of who Theodore really was. And I, finally free from that web, could breathe without the weight of sustaining an illusion that was never mine. Time passes in curious ways when we rebuild our lives. The days seem endless, but the years fly by. That's how it was for me. Between batches of fudge and cake deliveries, between Benjamin's school meetings and worries about the future, I hardly noticed that we were already in 1987. 5 years had passed since that night I broke into the basement door. My small confectionery business had grown beyond my expectations. From a home kitchen in the basement, Merriweather's Sweets now occupied its own store downtown. I had 3 permanent employees, all women like me, restarting their lives after separations or widowhood. It wasn't a multinational, of course, but it gave me a decent living and, more importantly, independence. Benjamin was now 12, in that complicated phase between boy and adolescent. He suffered from his father's absence, who rarely fulfilled the visitation agreement. Theodore appeared on important dates, birthdays, graduations, always with expensive gifts, as if objects could substitute presents. After the bank scandal, he had moved with Claire to the city, where he opened an accounting office. From Ernest's comments, who maintained sporadic contact with his father, the business was doing reasonably well, although never as prosperous as his previous position. Ernest, my firstborn, was now 29 and had married Gabriella, a doctor he met during his residency at the city hospital. They were expecting their first child, my first grandchild. Cecilia, at 25, was teaching at the College of Education and was engaged to Paul, a math teacher. My older children had followed their paths, built their lives. Despite the wound left by their father's betrayal, both had become balanced adults, dedicated professionals, people of integrity. It was in that year, 1987, that I received a call I would never have expected. It was a Thursday in July. I remember perfectly. I was at the store finalizing an especially complex wedding cake when Marisa, my assistant, called me to the phone. "Mrs. Blackwood, there's a young woman named Helena wanting to speak to you. She says it's important." Helena. The name hit me like a punch to the stomach. Helena, Theodore's daughter with Claire. The girl from the photo in the basement. The child who, without knowing, had shared her father with my children for so many years. My first reaction was to refuse the call. What could I say to the other woman's daughter? What subject could we have in common besides the betrayal that indirectly connected us? But curiosity won out. "Hello?" I answered, my voice firmer than I felt. "Mrs. Blackwood, I'm Helena. Helena Wells, daughter of Claire and, well, of Theodore." The voice on the other end was young, polite, with a slight tremor of nervousness. "I also know who you are," I replied without hostility, but also without warmth. "What can I do for you, Helena?" "I'd like to talk in person. I know it's a strange request, but it's about August, my brother." August, the other child, the firstborn of the clandestine relationship. "Has something happened to him?" I asked, surprised by my own concern. "He's in the hospital. Had a motorcycle accident. It's not serious, but—" She paused as if searching for courage. "He wants to meet his half-siblings, all of you." Actually, it was a minor accident, but I think it made him think about life, about connections he never had. I remained silent, absorbing those unexpected words. I thought about refusing immediately. Why should I allow the children of the other woman to enter our lives now? Wasn't everything we had already gone through enough? But then I remembered Benjamin asking why he couldn't see his father more often. I remembered Ernest, who even as an adult still carried the hurt of abandonment. I remembered Cecilia and her trust issues in relationships, always fearing being betrayed as her mother had been. And I also thought about August and Helena, children who grew up in a lie just as much as mine did. Children who probably suffered when Theodore chose to openly live with them, only to betray their mother with a third woman shortly after. Weren't they also victims of that man's inconstancy? "Where is your brother hospitalized?" I finally asked. "At St. Luke's Hospital in the city, room 307. "I'll think about your request, Helena. I can't promise anything." "I understand, Mrs. Blackwood. Thank you so much for taking my call." I hung up the phone with a whirlwind of contradictory emotions. 5 years had passed, but the pain of betrayal was still there, like a poorly healed wound that hurts when the weather changes. Would it be fair to my children to force them to meet Theodore's other children? Would it be healthy for Benjamin in particular, who still suffered from his father's absence? I spent the night reflecting. The next day, I gathered my 3 children in the living room of our house, the same room where, years before, we had celebrated so many Christmases as a family, unconscious of Theodore's parallel life. "I received a call yesterday," I began, without beating around the bush, "from Helena, the daughter of your father with Claire." I saw the surprise on their faces. In 5 years, we had never openly discussed the other children. It was a taboo subject avoided in rare mentions of Theodore. I told them about August's accident, about his desire to meet them. I explained that I hadn't made any decision and that I would respect what they felt. It was too delicate a matter for me to decide alone. The first to speak was Ernest, always the most pragmatic. "They aren't to blame for Dad's choices," he said after a long silence. "We're adults now. Maybe it's time to heal some wounds." Cecilia seemed more hesitant. "I don't know if I'm ready for this, Mom. Every time I think about that woman, those children, it's like reliving the pain again." Benjamin, still a preteen, looked at his older siblings, then at me. They're our siblings too, aren't they? Half, but they are. I want to meet them. His childlike simplicity touched me. For him, who had grown up practically without a father, perhaps the idea of having more siblings represented an expansion of family, not a reminder of betrayal. The following Sunday, I drove to the city with my 3 children. St. Luke's Hospital was an imposing building downtown, a contrast to our small municipal hospital in Millfield. In the elevator, I caught myself nervously adjusting my dress, checking my reflection in the mirror. Why did I care about my appearance? I wasn't there to impress anyone. Room 307 had the door ajar. Inside, a young man of approximately 20 was sitting on the bed, his right leg in a cast, elevated by a support. Beside him was a girl I recognized as Helena, older than in the photos I had seen in the basement, but with the same delicate features as her mother. When we entered, both looked in our direction. There was a moment of loaded silence, the kind of silence that weighs tons and seems to last an eternity. "You came," Helena finally said, tears welling in her eyes. "We may be a broken family," I interrupted, "but we are still decent people." August gave a sad smile. "Thank you for coming, especially you, Mrs. Blackwood. I know it must have been the hardest decision." There was something in that young man's sincerity that disarmed my last defenses. It wasn't Theodore there with his lies and manipulations. It was just a young man who, like my children, carried the consequences of a selfish father's choices. The following hours were strange, tense at times, surprisingly light at others. We discovered curious coincidences. August had the same strawberry allergy as Ernest. Helena and Cecilia shared a passion for Russian literature. Benjamin and August had identical musical tastes, despite their age difference. When we left the hospital, something had subtly changed. We weren't friends, much less a unified family, but we had crossed a bridge that had seemed impassable for so long. In the years that followed, the 5 siblings developed their own relationships, independent of Theodore or me. Sometimes August would come to Millfield and have dinner at our house. Helena regularly corresponded with Cecilia, sharing books and impressions about favorite authors. When Ernest had his first child, Helena and August were invited to the christening. Claire and I never became friends. There were wounds too deep for that, but when we met at family events, we managed to maintain a polite cordiality. She too had suffered a betrayal by Theodore after all. We shared that painful experience. As for Theodore, his story didn't have a happy ending. After betraying Claire, he wandered between brief and troubled relationships. The accounting office failed in 1990 during the economic crisis. He tried to reconcile with his children, all 5, but the wounds were deep. He visited them sporadically, always trying to buy affection with expensive gifts, without understanding that lost time has no price. In 1995, I received a call from Helena. Theodore had suffered a massive heart attack at 65. He had died alone in his 1-room apartment on the outskirts of the city. The neighbors only noticed his absence 3 days later. The funeral was a strange moment. There we all were, me, my 3 children, Claire, August, and Helena, united by the man who in life had done everything to keep us separate. Looking at that simple coffin, I felt a mixture of emotions that I could never fully name. It wasn't hatred or love. Perhaps it was just understanding that Theodore, despite everything, was just a deeply flawed man, trying to find happiness in the most misguided way possible. The years continued to pass. My confectionery prospered, becoming a reference in the region. Benjamin graduated in gastronomy, gradually taking over the family business. Ernest and Gabriella gave me 3 grandchildren, Cecilia and Paul, 2. Even August and Helena, whom I always considered Claire's children, ended up becoming part of my story. August married a distant cousin of Ernest's, another curious irony of fate. Helena became the godmother of Cecilia's youngest daughter. And I, at 86, looking back, see that night when I broke into the basement door wasn't the end of a story, but the beginning of another, a story of reconstruction, of self-discovery, of forgiveness, not for Theodore, but for myself, for all the years I chose not to see, not to question, not to live fully. The basement, which for 25 years represented secrets and lies, became the cradle of my financial independence. The betrayal that could have destroyed me became the catalyst for a more authentic and fulfilling life. The children of the other woman whom I so feared ended up enriching our fragmented family. I don't romanticize suffering. I would have preferred 1,000 times to have had an honest marriage from the beginning. But if there's one lesson I learned in my long life, it's that we don't control what happens to us, only how we react to it. I broke down that door more than 4 decades ago, not just to discover the truth about my husband, but to free myself from the invisible chains I had helped forge. And in the process, I discovered that the real prison was never the fraudulent marriage or the small town with its judgments. It was the fear of living on my own terms. So, if you're watching this story, perhaps facing your own locked door, your own unrevealed secret, remember, the truth may hurt like hell at first, but the freedom that comes afterward, oh, the freedom is worth every tear shed, every sleepless night, every painful new beginning, because in the end, it's not the years of suffering that define our story, but the moments of courage when we choose the truth, however uncomfortable it may be. And in that choice, we discover not just who we really are, but who we can become. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like, subscribe to the Grandma's Diary channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of my life stories. Share in the comments where you're watching from, and if any part of my journey resonated with your own experience. Your interaction means a lot to me and helps me continue sharing these lessons I've learned in my 86 years of life. Thank you for listening to me today, and until the next story.